our kids are always watching us and learning how to treat their own bodies by watching how we treat ours. Hello, and welcome back to the Nourished and Thriving Mama podcast. I want to start this episode off with a story that I just shared over on my Instagram. It was where I was scrolling through Instagram during a late night feeding with my daughter, and I came across this post that just hit me so hard, like deep in my soul. When I read it, I stopped dead in my tracks. And now I don't remember the exact wording of this, but it was something along the lines of how our kids are always watching us and learning how to treat their own bodies by watching how we treat ours. And in that moment, I realized that there's this trickling effect that happens from people in our lives. Maybe we even watched our own mothers at one point pointing out their flaws, making us hyper aware of those same things that they were having issues and struggling with, or maybe grandparents or friends around us. They've influenced us by the way that they've talked about themselves. And it was in that moment that I felt the weight of all of that. And I thought, oh my gosh, how I speak to myself when I look in the mirror, when I look at pictures of myself, I can't be doing that. I tear myself apart. And I never want my daughter to grow up feeling about herself the way I was feeling about me. I didn't want her to hate her body because of something she'd seen me do, because she's seen me tear myself apart. And that's when I decided that I had to stop. I couldn't be doing that anymore. I had to stop pointing out all of my so-called flaws or the things that I'm trying to fix of myself. Stop judging myself when I look at myself in the mirror or in pictures. Stop focusing on what doesn't look quite right or how my clothes don't fit quite right. And all of that negative stuff needed to stop. And instead, I began to see and try to celebrate the strength and power of my own body. Because I started to realize that my postpartum weight loss journey wasn't only about me. And the steps I took to get there were going to be influencing her as well. And I want to show up as the healthy, confident, loving, full of self-respect mom that she can see and mimic and repeat. So to all the moms listening, I want you to know in this moment, you are not broken. You are whole. You created life, and that's a strength. I don't know if anything can match that. And when you take on your own postpartum journey, try to approach it from a place of love and appreciation for all that your body has been able to do, and not from this place of you need to fix things. Now, I know I started this off super deep, but today I want to talk about 3 steps that helped me move from that place of self-criticism to self-love and appreciation, even when it felt like it was impossible. So I'm going to give you some real actions that you can take into your everyday and help start rewriting how you talk to yourself and change it into a more empowering way. All right, so the first step is catching yourself and interrupting that negative self-talk. Now, obviously, after reading that post on Instagram, it wasn't until the next time I found myself standing in front of a mirror that I started to work on this first step. It was the easiest place for me because seeing myself in the mirror would instantly trigger those negative thoughts. The thoughts of how weird my body shape was after having my daughter, how nothing I was wearing fit just right and it was tight in all the wrong places, and the stretch marks and the weird loose skin, and me thinking, do I need to have surgery to fix all of this? How did I get so huge? How could I have let this happen to myself? So many things. But it's in this first step where you start catching yourself in the act of these thoughts coming in and you start to pay attention to them. And I want you to think about this. Like when you notice these thoughts, pause for a second and think, is this how I would talk to like a friend of mine? You know, you need to start to become your own friend. Oftentimes we are so much nicer, kinder, and we'll raise our friends up, even if they tell us something that is like, girl, you got yourself into that. No, we'll still try to raise them up. We'll not try to bring them down further. That's not a good friend. But it just seems so easy to be so hypercritical and judgmental and downright mean to our own selves. And I'm sure things that you've said to yourself about yourself are things that you would never say to your friends. You would never tell them that. Like, you're not good enough, or you look terrible, or how on earth did you let yourself go this much? So, why would we say this to ourselves? And we can get even deeper with this. Would we say these things that we say to ourselves to our children? Like, imagine that. Imagine some of the thoughts about your own body and saying that to your kids. Absolutely not. No way. Do you want to traumatize them? So why are we traumatizing ourselves? So it's this shift in thinking about how you're speaking to yourself. Like, would I speak to my daughter or son or my friend like this? Or would I speak to myself at 10 years old if I was standing right in front of myself at 10 years old? Would I say the same things? Like, how did you let yourself get so bad? Like, no, we cannot be saying these mean things to ourselves. If you could never imagine saying these examples to somebody else, why would you say them to yourself? You are worthy of the same kindness, the same uplifting, the same encouragement that you'd give to a friend if they came to you with these same struggles. So I want you to practice pausing after these thoughts arise. And it's sometimes just this awareness can start to break this habit of the self-criticism. All right, we're going to move on to the next step, which is reframing with empowerment and gratitude. So when these thoughts arise and you pause, the next step will be replacing that thought that you had with a statement that celebrates your strength, your resilience, or even just thinking about the miracle of what you've done to be able to bring a child into this world. As moms, we've done something so incredible. We've created life and carried life. Our bodies rearranged organs. We nourished another human and brought them into the world, and that makes us extraordinary just with that. So remember that. All right, so let me give you some examples of reframing thoughts that might come up, such as, I hate how I look. We need to change that into, I am so grateful for my body's strength, or I'm amazed at what my body has been able to do and create this amazing family that I now have. One for me personally was the shift with stretch marks. That was a hard one for me personally because yeah, obviously when I gained 60 pounds while I was pregnant, my body had to stretch incredibly to make space for my daughter. But the look of the stretch marks, it seemed like they had overtaken my whole entire body, and they were bright red, and it was so in your face, and it was so like, oh my gosh, look at these are horrible. That was where I had to put a lot of focus into, was the stretch marks, because I needed to reframe that into something more empowering. And what really helped me with that one was seeing other posts on Instagram that were like real, where people were referring to the stretch marks as their tiger stripes. And I was like, what is this? Okay. And, at first I was like, yeah. But you know what? And then I started like really taking that on. I was like, yes, that's like a rite of passage. Like that is like the proof that you're a mom. Like majority of moms have the stretch marks from having a child. There's some lucky ones out there that never got them. But it was a shift in my brain, like seeing that was what was really going on in other people's lives, other moms' lives, and it was more normal. And people were referring to them as tiger stripes and not, oh my God, stretch marks, so horrible. That I started shifting that with myself. And I started feeling like, Yeah, I have these because my body was freaking able to grow and birth and nourish and, everything with my daughter. So I had to reframe that one. And it was very hard because you kind of don't believe the reframing at first, but you just have to keep sticking with it. So I want you to start thinking of empowering statements for yourself where you can replace those negative thoughts that start to come up. And oftentimes you're going to notice that it's the same kind of few thoughts coming through your head on a day-to-day basis. Mine were mostly about the stretch marks, about my midsection just looking a little bit weird, and my stomach, basically. Those were the big ones that really were bothering me because I was thinking, am I going to have to need surgery because my stomach just looks so horrible? And slowly over time, I worked through those and started changing those thoughts to be more empowering. I started focusing more on what I was doing. I started focusing on how great my arms were starting to look because I was lifting weights. I started looking at my legs. My legs, I'm so freaking proud of them. They are so muscular and strong. And I've been able to rephrase the way I look at my body in empowering and being grateful for what it can do. But it takes time. And that's where we come to the third step, which is just practicing this act of self-compassion on a day-to-day basis. If you stay consistent with it, your brain is going to start to believe it. You have to change these neural pathways in your mind that go to the negative and start shifting them to start going to the positive, the empowering, and the gratitude. And that doesn't happen overnight. You can't just go stand in the mirror for 2 hours and tell yourself all these empowering things over and over and over again, because that is not going to make it concrete in your brain. And it's going to help some. Please don't go spend 2 hours in front of the mirror. Just a little practice every day. 30 seconds when you're standing in the mirror doing makeup or doing your hair, telling yourself how great you freaking are, because you are. And I'm going to tell you that in the beginning, you probably aren't going to believe yourself. And you're going to say, this doesn't make sense. This feels silly. I don't believe what I'm saying. But the continual practice of this, it's going to start to cement in your brain, and you're going to start to believe the thoughts that you continuously keep telling yourself. We're just training your brain to think about yourself in a more empowering way. And I'll tell you that once you start doing this and once it starts sticking, this starts spilling over into other areas of your life in a good way. And you start seeing hey, I'm doing better in my career. I'm doing better with my relationship with my significant other. I'm doing better with my fitness. I'm doing better with my nutrition. I'm doing better with everything because you're starting to really bring yourself up and believe better things about yourself. And when you have more of that positivity going into your brain and that empowering thinking, you feel like you can accomplish anything. And I'm telling you, it starts to spill over into all these other areas, and all these other areas start to get better. And it just gets easier and easier and easier. And that's when things start to get really freaking amazing. Okay, so before I wrap up this episode, let's just review the 3 steps again, which is catching and interrupting that negative self-talk, reframing that negative self-talk with something empowering and with gratitude, and then just practicing this on a day-to-day basis. So go ahead and start trying this. Start by catching that one negative thought, reframing it into something empowering, or practicing for 30 seconds in the mirror, telling yourself a bunch of kind and empowering, true things about yourself, because they are true. You just don't believe them yet. And talk about yourself in an amazing way, because you have accomplished a lot. If you are a mom and you're listening to this, there are so many things that you've done in your life that you should be proud of. So we do not need to be focusing on things that bring us down. Just remember the simple fact that you are a mom makes you powerful and completely worthy of self-love. You are so much stronger than you realize. And every small act that you do of self-compassion and empowerment brings you closer and closer and closer to feeling it fully in your life. And it's this practice of loving yourself and appreciating yourself that is going to help break the cycle of our kids picking up body shaming, judgment, and criticism of themselves from us. Because we need to lead as the example of what healthy looks like, what positivity looks like, what empowerment looks like. And it starts with us and how we treat ourselves. So thanks for tuning in. And if you found anything helpful, let me know. I'd love to hear from you on Instagram. Send me a DM. Tell me what really resonated with you, or if you've started doing this practice, how you're feeling, and leave a positive review if you found this podcast to be really helpful. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode.